Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peter Watches TV, where I watch all the TV shows, and then I come over here and I react to them, and then you guys sound off in the comment section below, and you let me know what you think. It's kind of like we're having a conversation about television shows, and I cover reality TV shows, and I cover all the trending shows on Netflix, and Apple, and Paramount, and Peacock, and everywhere else, and Max, and I also cover true crime, and today we're going to talk about a true crime case. Now, before I get into this, I do want to say one thing, and I want to make this very, very clear, because whenever I cover true crime documentaries that I have watched, I always get a couple people that will say, well, did you not know about this? Did you not know about that? Did you not know about this? I am just reacting to the documentary that I watched, okay? If I know something or if something comes into my head, then I might mention it, but this is not a dissertation on the case itself. This is literally just a reaction to the documentary. Don't let that stop you from sharing information that you might know in the comment section below. If you want to share some information with other people that watch the documentary, feel free to do that. Especially when it comes to the JONBENET Ramsey case, there is so much information out there. There are so many books out there. For those of you that do not know, I have a true crime book club. We're going on our 6th year that I run with my good friend Mel. If you want to join, it's linked below. I just announced today on my BookTube channel. So for those of you that don't know, I also have a BookTube channel called Peter Likes Books. It's where I read books and review books, and I have 2 book clubs over there. And one of them is a true crime book club. And I just announced today the book. So every month we pick a true crime book and we pick a true crime documentary to watch. And December's true crime documentary is the JONBENET Ramsey case on Netflix. I believe that we've already read a book about JONBENET Ramsey in the book club. I feel like we read it like the first year or 2. I could be wrong about that, but I've read and I've seen so many things about JONBENET Ramsey. I remember when the murder occurred. I remember seeing it on the news. My roommate and I at the time, we watched all of it. I can remember watching investigative reports. I can remember watching Living Dolls, a documentary about the beauty pageants, the baby beauty pageants. I can remember all this stuff coming out about the beauty pageants at that time, and on and on and on. It's a case that I followed for a very long time. And so going into this, and that being said, I'm not bringing all of that into this. I'm just reacting to the documentary, okay? I just want to say that. I didn't really know what I thought about going into this documentary. I do want to say this, okay? Like, I just watched Unsolved Mysteries, and they had the whole thing about Area 51. It's like, I do not want to see one more documentary about Area 51 unless they are literally going to bring out and show an alien body that they have at Area 51. I've seen everything. I've read everything about Area 51. I'm bored of it, okay? I feel like that is a dead horse that they have beat to death. Like, it's like I could not even believe that Unsolved Mysteries put it in there. And furthermore, I was kind of surprised that people were really interested in it. I was like, why are we continuing to tell? And there's so many, like, alien stories that we could be telling out there. Why that? Similarly with cases like this, unless there's a new angle or unless there's new information, I'm pretty highly critical of the documentaries. I will just say that. And so I went into this thinking I was going to be pretty highly critical, okay? And right before I started it, my best friend, she and I watch a lot of true crime and talk about it, and, you know, she had followed this case as well, and she texted me last night, right before I started watching it, and she had said she was watching it, and she said she had to turn it off because it was so sad. She said she felt so bad for the parents. And I think that's the whole question about the JONBENET Ramsey case is who did it, right? Like, and for years and years and years, the parents were accused of killing their daughter, JONBENET Ramsey. So for those of you that do not know what I'm talking about, I believe it was in 1996, JONBENET Ramsey, who was 6 years old at the time, her mother called the police and reported that she had been kidnapped. They found a kidnapping note, or a ransom note. When the police came to the house, at this point, friends and the police had, like, gone all through the house. I mean, there were so many footprints and all this kind of stuff that had gone through the house that they really messed up the investigation from the very beginning. And I thought this documentary would talk more about that. They did talk some about it, but they didn't talk as much as I thought they would. That's kind of that's kind of a known fact about this case, is that the police from the very beginning, like, really botched the investigation. I mean, they've said things like, they even said in this documentary that they let friends of the family in because they thought it was a kidnapping. Well, even if it was a kidnapping from that home, it should have been a crime scene. And people that worked within the police department that were critical of the police department said it was a crime scene. So anyway, JONBENET Ramsey is missing. She's not in her bed. Her mother finds this ransom note. That's for $118,000, which incidentally happens to be the exact bonus that her father, John Ramsey, is getting that year for holidays. And so they don't know where she's at. Well, then when the police come, they're searching the house and they find her in a room off the basement. They find her body, and she has been strangled. So then it turns into this: who did it? There's a broken window down in the basement. There's like a suitcase, so it looks like whoever came in and came out. What's speculated is that somebody came in through the window, left through the window, went upstairs to JonBenet's. There's a lot of speculation. An entire person wrote a book, the police investigator, so negligent, I think, after watching this documentary. This guy came out and wrote an entire book saying that that Patsy Ramsey, the mother, killed JonBenet, wrote an entire book about it. I mean, can you even imagine? Killed JonBenet because she had wet her bed, and so Patsy like lost her mind and then killed her daughter, and then she and John covered the whole thing up. Okay, so going into this documentary, I just have to say this, right? Like, what I said was, I want something new, all right? And I want a new point of view, or I want them to present something new. When I watched the trailer, all right, the trailer said if they're ever going to catch the killer, they're going to catch it now. Well, what the documentary proves is if they were ever going to catch the killer, they were going to catch the killer 28 years ago, okay? Almost 30 years ago. That's when they were going to catch the killer. But the police were so insistent on focusing on the parents that they... And you know what's interesting is I've talked about this case a lot in videos, and I even went to this documentary being like, are they going to prove that the parents didn't do it? Because there's always been a part of me that has thought that the parents did it. John Ramsey, so the father and the older brother are, not Burke, but the older brother, are heavily, the father is really, John Ramsey is really heavily interviewed throughout this documentary. Patsy, his wife, has passed away from cancer years ago. He's remarried today. He is heavily interviewed. This is like one of the first interviews he's done in years about JonBenet Ramsey's death. And it's a very... like human interaction that you get with him. Unlike the other, I mean, he was human in the other interviews, but they're like on a couch interview. This is like, I mean, he's just going through this stuff, right? If I ever had any thought that maybe the parents were involved in this documentary cleared that up for me. I do not believe that the parents were involved in this in any way, shape, or form. I think the police botched it up because they were so focused on paying all their attention to the parents. I mean, I've said for a long time that I thought that maybe when the mom passed away, she'd leave some note and we'd find something out or something like that. I'd said that and speculating about it in the past. But this documentary was so sad. It was so sad that not only had they lost their daughter, and that she was horribly murdered, but then on top of that, the public scrutiny that they got from the media. And they really show it in this documentary in a way that had really never been shown before. Now, the new thing that they do show is at the end of the documentary, they talk about, that there's this whole question of DNA in there, right? And so supposedly they say there's been a problem with the DNA, and then they talk about the crime scene being contaminated, but they don't really talk about what the problem is with they don't really talk about what the actual problem is with the DNA, okay? But John Ramsey and the family of JonBenet Ramsey have petitioned for the court to retest the DNA and also to retest items that have never been tested before, okay? We're seeing this in a lot of cases right now. We're seeing this with the Scott Peterson case. And so, but this is a case where, you know, like there was rope found in the home that I don't believe that they ever tested that for DNA. So there's a lot of things, there's the sheets in the bedroom that they didn't test for DNA. And so he's asking that those things be tested for DNA. But here's the problem with this, okay, is that for the last 28 years, they have been ruling out people that they brought in as suspects because they didn't match DNA. Now they're saying that there was a problem from the get-go with the DNA. So what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go back to the very beginning and rule out each suspect all over again, which could include John and Patsy Ramsey, okay? So it could open this media frenzy. You know, JonBenet's mother is gone at this point. Her brother Burke, who a lot of people... So when you watch this, I just want to say, before you, if you haven't watched it yet, watch it before you pass judgment on John and Patsy Ramsey and her brother Burke. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine last night that's also in our True Crime Book Club before I started watching this, and she was like, what's your theory? And I said, before watching the documentary, and she said, yeah, what's your theory? And I said, my theory is that it has to be an intruder. Because they've always speculated that Burke had a part of it. Well, Burke at the time was 9 years old, okay? I have an 8-year-old nephew. To convince an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, okay, to keep silent for 20 plus years and never share anything that happened, he was supposedly asleep upstairs, which means that the parents would have had to have done it, okay? Which means that one of the parents did it and the other parent was complicit in covering it up. I mean, you're talking about such a deep thing now, right? With the writing writing of the note and all this kind of stuff. I mean, it was so deep, when at the same time, go back to the DNA, none of the DNA on her underwear or anything else matched John or Patsy or Burke Ramsey, okay? And handwriting samples came back, and they show this in the documentary, to not match John or Patsy or Burke Ramsey. So the note was not written by them, okay? But now we're going back and saying that the DNA was not conclusive to begin with because they didn't fully test it. So anybody that was ruled out back in the day is now back on the board, okay? And that is what this documentary is doing. It's trying to bring attention to the fact that they want new things that should be DNA tested, which I think that they should be if they were never tested to begin with. This whole thing, when you watch this documentary, first of all, anybody that has never watched a conclusive documentary about JonBenet Ramsey, I would say this is the conclusive documentary about JonBenet Ramsey. There's a lot of speculation, like Santa Claus guy and stuff like that they leave out of this documentary, but I don't even know that I think it's pertinent to this documentary, if you want to know the truth. When you watch this documentary, I mean, for somebody like me that's seen all this stuff before, the first episode and part of the second episode it's a little slow because it's repetitive of a lot of things. But you get John's interviews through there, you get the older brothers, you get the reporters, you get the attorneys, you get a lot of people's interviews. It's heavily relies on interviews of people that were there at the time. It's very, very interesting. But as you watch it, okay, it's not just a plea for reopening the case and retesting these things, which they are looking at possibly doing. A cold case investigation firm was opened several years ago to relook at the JonBenet Ramsey case. But it's also examining, okay, the idea of when media puts something out there and says that it's true, that you have to believe it because it's true. And when you watch this documentary and you see the things that happened to this family, and you think, if you are, if you lived with growing up with the JonBenet Ramsey case like I did, and you remember the case, you will want to start checking your bias, like I did when I was watching it last night, because even any question that I ever had with whether the parents did or not, it's like they answer every single question in the documentary, okay? And how whereas I thought these parents were evading the police, I thought they were evading interviews, I thought they had something to hide because the media painted that way. And really what it was that on day one, this police investigator that then wrote a book, okay, which the Ramseys sued him for, he wrote a book, okay, saying that Patsy Ramsey, that she killed her daughter because she wet her bed. He comes up with this whole theory that he can't prove. There's no wet sheets. There's no wet underwear. There's no proof to this whatsoever. He writes this huge book, okay? He's in charge of the investigation, and on day one, he decides the Ramseys he basically convicts them on day one, okay? And so then they start feeding information. They show, there's a whole jury where he's investigated in the civil trial, where he is investigated in a civil trial for things that he put out there in the media. The police were putting things out there in the media. He even says it under oath to coerce the media to kind of force the hand of the Ramseys so that maybe they'd be like, okay, we surrender, we did it, because they're so worried that the media is like, I mean, it's literally the public court trial is what it is, right? And so that the police were running the media, and the media are interviewed as well, and they're like, yeah, we were just reporting things that the police were feeding us. And that's what it is. And when you realize that the police were feeding misinformation to the media for years on end, you sit back and you go, wow. And if you're honest with yourself, like I was, I bought into a lot of it. There was a lot of it that I believed. But there were things that were in this documentary that I didn't even know. So let's get into some of these things. Like I said, all the time that they were focused, they were feeding all this misinformation, okay, to the media. I mean, all the information, if you followed the case, did you ever hear about the footsteps in the snow around that there was like no footsteps, and so there's no way they could have gone in the back window? Well, what they proved in the documentary was there was sparse snow. There was no snow going up to the back door. They took pictures of it. That was a complete fabrication by the police about the footprints in the snow. I mean, I think there was even like a documentary or something put out called Footprints in the Snow about the JonBenet Ramsey case. I mean, I remember that being such a huge part of the case, okay? They found the DNA results and didn't release the DNA results for 6 months, okay? The police chose not to release the DNA results. I think it was almost a year that they didn't release the DNA results to the media, okay? That would have immediately ruled out the family and would have immediately cleared them. But they let the media continue to have a frenzy with them. There were so many things that they fed to the media, okay, or allowed the media to get wrong, so that the media would continue to go after family, so the family would be forced out, and then maybe they'd make some kind of confession or something like that. And in all this time that they were feeding this misinformation to the media, that the police were doing this, okay? The police, who we should trust in a case, a murder case like this, which first of all, you find out that the lead investigator wasn't even a homicide detective, he was a narcotics investigator, okay? He had no experience in homicide whatsoever. And he's leading the case on this, and he's so arrogant and smug that all this time they spent on coercing the media to believe that the Ramseys were the ones that did this, they could have spent all that time, money, and resources on trying to find the real killer. But 28 years now, just like I don't believe that we're going to ever see a body at Area 51, I don't believe we're going to find who the murderer is of JonBenet Ramsey. I don't. I think the crime scene was too messed up because they didn't think anything through. And the one guy is so nice, he even admits to it. The one investigator was like, yeah, we let all their friends and family in because we thought it was just a kidnapping. And he kind of looks at the camera. And I'm thinking to myself, but it's still a crime scene. Why would you let all... And he's like, we thought they were their support people. And then it shows this other guy, and he's like, yeah, as police, you're supposed to... That's a crime scene. Like, you're supposed to close that off. I mean, even the police are critical of it. And but now it's probably too late. They can't go back 28 years in time and do all this kind of stuff, you know? Then it goes in and talks about the DNA results, and it talks about, I mean, the fact that we live in a world today where DNA results and writing samples, like, either convict or clear somebody, and they still were under media scrutiny after the DNA results came out, and people were like, well, there's a way that they could have got around it. There is unknown male DNA on JonBenet Ramsey's underwear, okay? That has no connection to anybody in the Ramsey family whatsoever. They show that. I mean, they talk about it extensively. One of the guys, so I didn't even, like, there are a lot of it I knew about, like, the grand jury trial and all this kind of stuff, that they decided not to convict John, or not to indict John and Patsy Ramsey. There were a lot of things about that. Even those guys were not, you could tell, the two guys, I mean, these were attorneys that were so sharp and so intellectual. They were not convinced the Ramseys had anything to do with this whatsoever, and were forced into a position to take this case that they didn't really want to take. You could tell, right? And then it goes in, and they're doing this interview with, and they show, Patsy Ramsey starts talking about the Geraldo show. Okay, now I used to watch the Geraldo show quite a bit at this time. I used to watch the Club Kid stuff on the Geraldo show and all that, right? When I think about the negligence of this, okay, Geraldo Rivera, who I think thinks of himself as an investigative journalist, he did a show on the Geraldo show. I was so blown away by this. I did not know. This is one piece I did not know. Where he's like, we don't know. It was called something like The Ramseys on Trial, okay? And he basically pulled 6 people out of the audience to be the jury. And then he had people that were supposedly experts, but they weren't really, that were talking about, because JonBenet Ramsey was in beauty pageants, that her parents, there was like, this one woman, she said in there, they show the scene of JonBenet Ramsey doing a Christmas show at a retirement home. And for a minute and a half, she takes a saxophone like a kid would and is playing with it like this, like she's playing on the saxophone. And the expert says for a minute and a half, she masturbates with the micro, or with the saxophone, which is indicative of somebody that has been, essayed. And I'm like watching this, and I'm like, they show the clip of the video, and I'm like, I don't know where your sick mind got that little girl playing a saxophone is imitating, a 6-year-old girl is imitating masturbation, but that's not what I got when I watched it. I got that was a little girl imitating a jazz saxophone player on a saxophone. I mean, it's just the reach. And the fact, and then they, on the show, Geraldo's like, the jury convicts Patsy Ramsey and for being liable. And I'm like, if you were a parent watching this and you had lost your child and you knew that misinformation was being fed to the police and the media was going on this and the Geraldo show was holding a mock trial convicting you on national television, and they sue, these people sue like crazy, and I don't blame them. I hope they got hundreds of millions of dollars. It is so sad. That part was just blown away to me. And then the fact that people speculate that Burke did it. Okay, I saw when this came out a couple years ago. Well, this is what had happened, okay? Is that they couldn't get Patsy and John Ramsey anymore. Patsy had passed away. So then they start coming out. It was in 2016. They actually addressed in the documentary that her brother Burke was the one that had to have done it, okay? Well, Burke at the time was 9 years old. If you've seen any pictures of Burke, I mean, he is a typical 9-year-old kid. My nephew is 8 years old. I have an 8 and a 12-year-old nephew. My nephew that is 8 years old, okay, I mean, he can play video games and he's doing all that kind of stuff, but I don't know that he is so sophisticated that he could, I mean, this guy, what they call it, Garrett or whatever, whoever killed JonBenet Ramsey, put two necklaces, Garrett necklaces with rope and wood around her neck and strangled her to death. I mean, did all this stuff to her, right? And then that means that the parents would have had to have covered it up, okay, by writing the note and putting Burke to bed, because Burke couldn't have written the note on himself, which means the parents would have had to, which means there would have had to have been a sit-down conversation, okay, where you say, from here on out, at 9 years old, for any of you that have ever been around a 9-year-old, okay, convince a 9-year-old to never let on, I mean, he would have had to have been the best actor in the entire world. They should have got him into like, the Oscar movies, because if that kid at 9 years old going forward could never utter a word of it or acted like he had any part in it or act weird. I mean, he was interviewed. They showed him being interviewed with a psychiatrist. He was all over a chair. He looked like a little kid being uncomfortable in a chair. Okay? Or maybe it's more likely that this kid who lost his sister because she was tragically murdered in his house the day after Christmas, okay, and grew up without a sibling at 9 years old, and goes into grocery stores and sees his face on the front of magazines that people are saying that he killed his sister. Maybe he's a little funky because of growing up in that. I think I might be, okay? I think that might affect me, or maybe anybody out there. But no, let's accuse a 9-year-old of killing his sister with absolutely no evidence whatsoever. You know, it's just baffling to me. And then it goes against, they talk about the allegations against the parents, and then they even question, they go in, and so before Patsy and John got married, his daughter Beth had passed away in a car accident, and they even go in, and like, they show the front pages of these, that police are going back to question her death. Could there have been something to it? Because all of the allegations around the parents are built on the essay allegations, because she was in beauty pageants, and so it's either one or the other, okay? It's either that the father was essaying her because he looked at her in a weird way because she was in these beauty pageants, or they put her in beauty pageants so they were negligent because they opened her up to somebody else, possibly like seeing her. Like they talk about this one photographer that was there. But that photographer could be a school photographer. Hell, they catch that one guy, that John Mark Carr or whatever, and he was working in two schools, two elementary, girls' elementary schools in Bangkok. So just because they had her in that pageant system doesn't mean that that would have, you know, it's so, that's a whole other video to talk about the whole pageant system, because that's like, I don't feel like they even gave that, like they talked about it highly in this documentary, but the treatment that got at the time, oh my God, that was a huge media frenzy itself. Then they go in, they do this, the grand jury, and they even, like, they went so far. I mean, what was so interesting to me in this 3-part documentary that was very conclusive, when you see it all, like when you look at it over the span of 30 years, it's like kind of easy to get, I mean, this is what I was going to say earlier. John even says in there that people would write him and say, I'm so sorry that I thought you did it for years. And he writes them back and says, why would you not think that? They weren't putting anything out there, right? When you look at it, and you've looked at it for 30 years, it makes a lot of sense that maybe the parents did do it, right? But when you look at it like you look at it in this documentary, and you see it all conclusively put together, what you see is that the police were entirely focused on the parents, okay? That they never even looked outside of the parents. And during the grand jury trial, okay, the prosecutors even go to China, to the underwear factory, to see if they can find a white man that works in the factory that could have touched the underwear before it ever came over here. They bought it and she put it on. They are looking for any reason possible, okay, to condemn these parents. They're looking for any innocent answer whatsoever. About halfway through the documentary, I didn't know about this guy. They bring in this guy. I can't even remember what his name is now, but he was this police investigation, this homicide investigator. Such a cool guy. Such a cool guy. Reminds me of a lot of people that I know in recovery. And he investigates the hell out of this thing. He's like 68. He ends up dying of cancer later. It's really sad. Well, I can't think of his name. It's something that's like really short. It's like, it starts with, like, it's STIL or something like that. Anyway, he was fantastic. And he shows how easy you could go in and out of the window, you know? Not to mention that at the beginning of it, John Ramsey says something about, like, I think we broke the window like a year before and I just never replaced it. But then they never come back to that whatsoever. I don't know. It was just, this investigation was so botched. And so then it goes back and they arrest this John Mark Carr who says that he did it, but then his DNA shows that he didn't do it, even though he was in the garage in Atlanta, Georgia, of the Ramseys' home when they arrest him, and he has all this information, but his DNA doesn't match. That's when they come out and they say, well, there's a problem with the DNA. But they don't really say what the problem is with the DNA. Just that the site was contaminated, and so that's when John Ramsey came out, and he wanted to retest all the DNA. I think that came out in 2022, okay? The family is asking for items never tested to be tested and for the DNA to be checked against genealogy, and that's how we're finding people like the Golden State Killer and things like that today. The Boulder police have put together a cold case task force. That just happened in the last couple years. Then it goes in and it talks about the CBS special that they accused Burke because she possibly ate some of his snacks, so he killed her. Okay, so JonBenet Ramsey, I mean, this is very much the bedwetting with the other investigator. So Burke Ramsey and his sister JonBenet are sitting there, and she ate some of his snack. So then in the middle of the night, he got up, and he took her down to the basement, tied her hands behind her head, choked her with this Garrett, okay? Did horrific things to her body, all right? Left her for dead, wrote a 3-page ransom note demanding exactly the sum of $118,000 from her parents, or they covered it up because she ate some of his snack. The psychopathy, okay, that CBS would even have to come up with something like that is unbelievable. Well, Burke sued him. In both cases, okay, because the Ramseys sued the guy that wrote the book, and Burke sued CBS, and in both cases, they settled for an undisclosed amount, okay, behind the scenes, so we'll never know what that happened. But they go in there and they talk about the CBS special, and then it says Burke sued CBS, the family sued the old detective who wrote the book accusing Patsy. The documentary, I mean, it leaves it open to, like, what is going to come from the DNA findings, what is going to come from the new evidence, or the evidence they never tested. My question is, why didn't they ever test it? In 28 years, why didn't they ever test it? This one guy, why can't I think of his name now? Oh, God, the detective, it's driving me crazy. I should have written it down. But the detective that worked the homicide case, and he continued to work it till his death, even when he wasn't on the case. He resigned. Anyway, it was so sad. He found out more in 6 months of working on this case than the police have found in 28 years, okay? And he said that he believed that the case could be solved. So I don't know. Maybe the case can be solved. I thought the documentary was fantastically done. I thought it was fantastically done in a way that, A, it presented almost all the evidence of the case that I knew up till today. B, it presented new information that I wasn't aware of before. And I'm somebody that's followed this case for a very, very long time. And C, I think most importantly what it showed was that the police had already ruled out the Ramseys, okay? They just let the media continue to believe in that. And some people have never let it go. When you look at this case and you look at what Patsy Ramsey went through until her death, okay? With this media scrutiny, this public scrutiny, and all this kind of stuff. And I know when I say this in the video, there will still be people that are like, no, they did it. When you watch a documentary and you see how the media literally was fed misinformation by the police, misinformation, phone calls that they could have been spending looking up people in the area, okay? Because they do show that there was a history in the area. The one police investigator, like, they find a girl that somebody came into her house in the middle of the night. Her mom finds her. The guy's about to essay her. She sprays him with pepper spray, and then he gets out of the house, okay? They go, oh, no, those cases are totally different. The police investigation that wrote a book, he spent more time condemning and convicting the parents than he ever did trying to solve the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, and that's the one thing this documentary shows. It's fantastically done. I was really blown away because I was expecting to be bored. I was expecting another retelling of the JonBenet Ramsey case, and that's not it at all. And it really, really, like my best friend said, it made me really sad for the parents in a way that I had never looked at the case before. I thought it was really, really well done and very objective too, and very objective. So anyway, let me know what you thought if you watched the documentary, or if you're going to watch a documentary. Let me know what you thought in the comment section below. I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.